What is going on, lovely people? We are Tottenham TV here, and the circus is in full swing. The clowns are out in their numbers, and Antonio Conte is set to depart Tottenham apparently in the next 24 to 48 hours. And we're at that time again of the year, aren't we, Sim?
That's what happens every 18 months. We get a new manager, people. Can't wait. Can't wait for Ryan Mason to take charge of this sinking ship. And we'll see where we go from here. Obviously, look, Conte was always going to... Look, we all knew when Conte was appointed, this was probably going to be the likely scenario and the likely ending to the situation, because it always ends like this with someone like Antonio Conte with charge. But usually, it ends like this after winning a few trophies. But... Not when it's at Spurs, unfortunately. That's not how we do things around here. We don't have the trophies to match. We just have the humiliation. That's all we can guarantee. We can't guarantee anything else. So
the life of a bloody Tottenham Hotspur fan.
I know it's depressing, to be honest, because I think we all kind of, after Pochettino went and we had Mourinho and Conte, we all kind of just put everything into the basket of maybe we look, it will end terribly, but maybe we can have a trophy to show for it with all this toxicity and all this short-termism and just for the here and now, we can maybe endure it if we do come away with a trophy, but it hasn't happened. We're going to have no trophies to show for it. We're going to have nothing to show for it. It's all going to be a big waste of time. And Levy, I think, not for the first time, but definitely for the largest time, has massive egg on his face after these last 4 years, in my opinion. He went in search of short-termism, and he's fallen fat on his face.
He's gone in search of it, but he didn't want to act upon it.
No,
which is like. How make that make sense to me? Like, how can you bring in Jose Mourinho? How can you bring in Antonio Conte for short-termism, but then give them like Jed Spence's and Joe Rodens and stuff like that?
Doesn't make any sense.
Like, what are they doing at this football club? And now you're hearing like the latest one that's coming out is from Gary Jacobs saying that Ryan Mason is on standby to take charge of Tottenham Hotspur.
He's always on standby to take charge of Tottenham.
And listen to this. Mason could be assisted by the likes of Chris Powell, Jermaine Defoe and Michel Vorm. The dream team.
Player managers, why not? Get them on the pitch. Why are they just managing? Why? I don't get Bale out of retirement. I don't like. Why are we just doing this to managers? Get them on the pitch, man. Why not? Absolutely, why not? It's ridiculous. This club is ridiculous. I think this is going to be a situation to drag us to top four. It ain't going to happen. They've royally screwed up. And also, if you look at the last 8 games, we're third in the form table. How are a team third in the form table in such crisis? I just don't understand it. But that is what happens when you have someone like as volatile as Antonio Conte in charge, who's willing to put his heart on his sleeve and just and not accept mediocrity. That's reality.
When you're thinking about like who you want as our next manager, you know, all the names come to mind, various names doing the rounds on social media, you know, the likes of Poch, Tuchel, Glasner, you know, and everyone else, Amorim, all these names. And like, can any name get you excited now after what we've been through in the last 4 years? We've had Jose Mourinho, Nuno, Conte, Poch. Everyone has been burnt by pretty much for the same reasons and the same way. So, like, how can you get excited about a new manager coming in or who's going to come in next?
I think in terms of big names, you can't, because we've had two of the biggest names that you can ever think of in the last, as our last two. Well, we had Nuno in between, but in terms of Mourinho and Conte, you don't get bigger than them, and we haven't been able to make it work. And it's not like. It's not as if we had Mourinho and you can say, oh, you know, he's finished. But if we had a manager in his prime, you know, it'd be different, because we had Conte and he's in his prime, and then that also didn't work. So I don't think it's about names. Pochettino wasn't a massive name when he first came to Spurs, and he was one who made it work. So I think at this point, it's not about getting excited about the biggest names and elite managers. It's about finding the right fit for what we want. Conte and Mourinho were never the right fit. I think the club, if they were going to continue to operate in the way they're operating, they were never going to be the right fit. You know, when Mourinho went back to Chelsea in his second spell, he told them exactly what he needed to win the league. He's like, if you get me Fabregas, if you get me Diego Costa, I will win you the league. And I remember Fabregas, I saw an interview recently, Fabregas was saying that before he signed for Chelsea, he had a meeting with Mourinho, and he said, "Look, this is my vision for how how I see us winning the league. This is exactly what I want in each position, and this is how I see the team moving forward, and this is going to win us the league." And he convinced Fabregas to join, and they did join. He did join, and they won the league. Obviously, it didn't last very long, but that's exactly what Mourinho is. He gets that short-term boost. He knows exactly what he wants, and he can get results. But at Tottenham, you know, I doubt he sat down with Levy. Is like, okay, I want Matt Doherty here, I want Joe Rodon here, I want Bergwijn here. It was
He says, "Get me Kim Min Jae for $5 million." And who?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. He probably sat down and said, "I want all these players," and they were never going to oblige. They were never going to give him what he needed. So he was always going to be compromising. It's always compromise. And he's not a manager who is elite when he's always having to compromise in every position. And this is what life is as a Tottenham manager. It's always going to be compromise, and you're always going to have players thrust upon you. We're just hearing today, Ali Gold in his article said that Spurs signed Danjuma, and no one thought to ask Conte if he fits the system. And apparently, so everyone's saying, you know, Conte's been backed, and Conte's look. Conte spent money, don't get me wrong, and do we have a better squad than we did last season? Yeah, we do. But my point is that Conte has been given players, good players, don't get me wrong, and he should be able to get more out of them, but he hasn't been given players because they fit his system, because they're giving him players to fit what Conte want to do. They're giving him players because they're able to get them, and they're good players. So it's not like they've sat down with Conte and said, like, okay, we really see Richarlison fitting in here, we really see Basuma fitting in here. This is where I'm looking at the formation, what we need in terms of transfer market, and we're going to sign players to fit into these positions. What we're saying is we're basically saying, well, Everton are struggling financial, so I think we could get Richarlison. Basuma's got 1 year left on his contract. I think we can get Basuma. And look, if you can give him to a manager who's maybe more adaptable and maybe more willing to compromise in how he plays and all that kind of stuff, maybe that can work. But when you've got a manager as stringent as Antonio Conte and how he wants to play, and who wants very specific things, that was never going to work. That was never going to be the way to move forward with him. And so that's why we're in a position where he doesn't even want to use some of the players that you've given to him because they don't fit the way he wants to play. And as much as Richarlison and Basuma and Danjuma and Spence, maybe they're good players, but when you sign Conte, you know it's a by and large, you know it's a short-term thing where he looks to really challenge for the big trophies over a short amount of time, and you give him things that he can work with for his system. And if you're not going to do that, then you're wasting everyone's time by appointing him.
I just hate this narrative going around the fan base every time this happens. Every time this happens, we hire a manager, the fan base are in kind of like unison saying, all right, this is Daniel Levy's last chance. And then he doesn't get what he wants in the transfer window, but we do make signings. The manager ultimately fails and gets the sack and gets really irate. And just before that, in the build-up to the manager getting the sack, everyone's blaming the manager and being like, oh, he's not good enough, get him out, look what we had under Poch, blah, 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 blah. And we end up, you know, going completely against the manager, forgetting exactly why the manager is in this exact situation every single time. I mean, it's like Groundhog Day every time. Every 18 months, we're in this exact same position just because we can't give a manager what they need. So, I mean, surely managers are going to have to start thinking twice before coming here. Like, it's a bit of a poison chalice.
That's what we're hearing. We're hearing Matt Law now in his latest article saying that a number of the Spurs candidates that we're looking at to replace Conte have the same reservations that Conte has, and they're thinking twice before jumping at the chance to become the new Tottenham manager, because they believe that. I'll get the. I saved the quote one sec from the article. says here, it is understood that a number of Tottenham's potential candidates to replace Conte share similar concerns to those he raised so publicly after the 3-3 draw against Southampton. There is a feeling from outside the club that Conte overachieved in his first season at Spurs by clinching Champions League qualification, and that this campaign is more reflective of the level of the squad and the ambition of the club. Managers are also said to have reservations over the running of the football operations at Tottenham, particularly given the doubts over the future of managing director Fabio Paratici. And that's another thing. If you're a manager coming into the club, you obviously you couldn't be willing to work under a director of football and be collaborative for sure. But while Paratici is there under the doubt of whether he's going to have a long-term future of the club, given the suspended sentence or whatever the 30-month suspension he has, whether he's going to be here long term if the appeal gets upheld, like. You don't know what kind of director of football you're going to be dealing with. You don't know what's going on when it comes to the footballing operations. It's up in the air. It's completely up in the air. So how can you sit down and agree something? And first of all, there might not be a director of football at all in a few months, or you might have a completely different director of football in a few months. So how can you agree any sort of long-term vision with the club when you don't know, when the footballing operations is so uncertain? That's also got to be an extra element.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what I was saying yesterday, that Conte completely overachieved last season, getting top four. We had no right, I was saying in the panel yesterday, to get top four last season. We're currently sitting in the top four. We could have gone third with a win over Southampton during the week. And I, for one, thought Conte has done a brilliant job since coming here. I really have. Yeah, fine. You can argue that the football wasn't the best to see. Yeah, fine. He has made mistakes. There's no two ways about it. And he does have some criticism to come his way. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's done a good job here at Tottenham Hotspur. Fourth last year, currently fourth, very close to third. And yeah, it was very disappointing the way we went out the cups and the way we have gone out of the cups since he's come here. But at the end of the day, that's not the targets that were set upon him when he came into this club. The targets were top four, get back into the Champions League. And when he came here, we were out of the Champions League for 2-3 years?
Yeah.
So he did a brilliant job getting us back into the Champions League. Yes, there has been money spent, but it's not the money that he wanted to spend and not the money that maybe we would have hoped to spend. I mean, like, how could we have gone to last window signing Antonio Conte and not getting a big centre-backs through the door, not getting big wing-backs through the door? Yeah, people were arguing, we got Pedro Porro. Yeah, how many games did Pedro Porro play under Conte? 3, 4?
And they're good.
Yeah, and they were good. So, look, Conte has been completely thrown under the bus by this football club. Jose Mourinho was completely thrown under the bus by this football club. So was Pochettino, and so was Nuno to a certain extent as well. So we're in a mess, man. We're in a massive mess, and I don't know. I mean, the only way I can see us getting out of it is to get a young, progressive manager that'll take time, and no two ways about it. We might come out of Europe for a couple of years while we rebuild and stuff, but we could see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel in a year or two.
Don't get me wrong. Conte's ego definitely sometimes is his own worst enemy, and sometimes gets him in trouble. His ego and his stubbornness are probably his two biggest weaknesses in terms of being a football manager, and that has definitely probably got in the way of how he's managed the squad, and maybe it's alienated some people, and maybe that's caused problems. But at the end of the day, when you look at the facts of the matter, football's a results business, and he's got us top four last season. He's in the top four this season, and I think that when you have a manager like Antonio Conte, as much as he's going to want to shift blame from himself and all these kind of things, and people can say it's ridiculous, and people can challenge his ego and all this kind of stuff, and there is some validity to it. But this is a manager who's won title after title in other football clubs. He knows his way of working works. He's been convinced of it his whole footballing career,
and it's worked here.
And it's worked here. He got us top four. So why why should he feel like he's the one responsible for the failure of this club to really push on and challenge for big things when we're struggling to really challenge the elite, and he's stubborn with his football system, and he wants Spurs to play in the system that he wants to in a stubborn way. Why should he feel like he needs to change when he wants to challenge those top honours? He's obviously going to have that ego about him, and you can blame him for it, and maybe that's held him back in a certain way, but at the end of the day, that's what elite football managers have. You have that ego. I think to get to where he is, you can't get to where he is without the ego that he has. And obviously, it's a problem like it is with a lot of managers, but you have to be able to manage that. And I think when a manager like Conte is at a club like Spurs and we're not competing for the top honours, he naturally grows frustrated. He sees the managers at the top, even Arteta and Guardiola, and he sees them challenging for titles, and he sees us struggling in a top four battle, and he gets frustrated because he wants the best. He hates mediocrity. He always wants to strive for more, and there are too many players, and there's too much of a culture at this club where we're happy for mediocrity. We're happy to be in top four challenges or even just miss out on top four. We're happy for all these situations to continue. I think, there are players who don't go home after defeats and think about what they can do better. They're just happy to turn up for training and move on from it. And they're not, and as Conte said, they're not as obsessed with it as he is about winning and about being the best. They're just too happy riding the wave and being mediocre, and that's a big problem when we're looking to move to the next level, especially after the Pochettino era. And unfortunately, until a lot of the culture and the mentality changes amongst the squad, we're never going to get to a stage where we're ever breaking that barrier of just finishing top four. And that's the problem at the moment, I feel.
What we're trying to do at this football club, what Levy's trying to achieve here, he's trying to turn us into a bit of a Chelsea where, we hire elite managers, we spend a bit of money, and they think that's going to kind of resonate into success. But what they don't understand is it takes proper planning and proper effort to get these players through the door, and it's not just any opportunity where they've had a good season or a good couple of seasons that you can get through the door and it'll work for the manager. You need to properly plan within a manager's system and earmark the positions that you need to bring in, and we don't do that at Tottenham. Yes, fine, like people argue that Conte's been backed. We spent loads of money since he's come in, which is true. Like we have spent loads of money since he's come in, but that doesn't mean specifically he's been backed. Not at all. And I don't get the kind of claims that when people say Conte has been backed, because if he's been backed, then we wouldn't still have Dyer starting every single week. We wouldn't still have these idiots that we see on the pitch every single week. We wouldn't have started the season with only Emerson Royale pretty much as our right wing back, with Matt Doherty going at the last day, a player called Jed Spence, who he didn't want to use whatsoever. I mean, that is not called being backed. That is just called making signings, club signings that are going to be here for the future and maybe, not going to bring instant success with Antonio Conte. That's not what you bring in Antonio Conte for. You bring in Antonio Conte to bring in players that he wants now so he can win now. That's the only reason you bring him in, and that goes for the same as Jose Mourinho as well. So if they want to go on this way, the only way forward is to sign someone like Pochettino, bring in someone like Carrick or company, someone like that, some young manager that's going to come in, work their hardest with what they've got, and build something for the future. Because this club ain't ready to win now. It's just not ready to win now, and it won't be for a while. So it's been completely pointless these last 4 years. Completely pointless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. There's been no progression. The football has been terrible. The fans have grown frustrated and they've grown apathetic a lot to what's going on as well. We had a really good thing going 4 years ago with Pochettino, and although it went stale near the end, that wasn't his fault. We all know the reasons why that happened. And now we're in a situation where we've gone from win now manager to elite manager to elite manager, and We still haven't made it work. We're still in the same situation where a lot of the same players and the squad is just a lot of the time not ready to progress further than where it was before, and we're in the very same situation. And like, we had that project under Pochettino where we were consistently getting top four, and it was good for what we were, but then maybe we got ahead of ourselves. Maybe we got ahead of our station. We as I said, when Pochettino was there, he normalized overachievement. That's exactly what he did by getting top four every season and making it look easy. And we're seeing that it's not that easy to be that consistent and play that kind of football all the time. And we got ahead of ourselves thinking that, all right, now we're in a new stadium, we're ready to win trophies every season, and we can do that with Mourinho and Conte, but we were never willing to actually act like we were going to give them what they wanted. And so there's no other way of moving forward but to have a different kind of manager. You can't carry on with these kind of high demanding managers who you're never going to satisfy, because we're not a kind of club who can satisfy their needs. That's the reality. So what's the point of trying? What's the point of even pretending that you can, because we're clearly not able to?
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Yeah, it's absolutely spot on. Look, we've got a few super chats in. One from OK saying Redknapp Mason in until the end of the year for motivation. I mean, Redknapp, I think he was on Talk Sport the other day throwing his hat into the ring saying he'll come and insist Ryan Mason.
Bring him in.
I mean, why not? I mean, it's better than Mason on his own, probably. So,
bring him in.
That's that. Benjamin Parsons, member for 5 months, saying, I think Kane only stays if Poch comes back here. Come on, you Spurs. I don't even think Poch can convince Kane to stay. I mean, why would Kane stick around for Poch? Doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. Look, in terms of, obviously, Kane and Poch, they know each other. And look, you always say, oh, Kane has a good relationship with him. And Kane has a good relationship with every manager except for Nuno, pretty much. Everyone's going to love Harry Kane. And he's always going to be a professional who works his best and performs under every manager. But in terms of Kane, like being in that, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to avoid that headspace he was in 2 years ago, where he wanted out, didn't turn up for training, was pretty much not motivated to be at his best because he wants to win big trophies. And the way this club's got another elite manager's come and gone now, another manager who shares the mentality of Harry Kane, who wants to win big trophies. And what's keeping him here? Really, to be honest, I don't know what's keeping him here anymore. He's already got that legendary status. Now he's got that top goal scorer record. So it's not like if he leaves now, he's risking that. He's always going to have that. He's always going to be in the history of Tottenham, whatever happens. So what is actually keeping him here? Just his love for Tottenham. I mean, that's not enough anymore, I don't think. Sometimes love's not enough to keep you together, and that's Absolutely. The reality. That is the reality. I think that's probably the only thing we have in our favour. In terms of keeping Kane, is that maybe Levy's going to really hold strong and not accept any bids. But if Kane really pushes for it this time and doesn't let up, then it's going to be very difficult for us to keep rejecting bids if Kane's going to be like the Kane we had 2 years ago.
Exactly, and we don't want that whatsoever. I'd rather have the money in than have that Kane back again. No, and the last super chat from El Dante saying, why can't Stellini manage for the rest of the season? I mean, he's going to be following Conte out the door. Don't have any qualms about that?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to give it. Yeah, if Conte leaves, Stellini follows him 100%. I can't see Stellini saying, oh, don't worry, I'll take over from Conte, and I don't see that happening. But we all know that it's the most frustrating thing is we all know that Conte's going to, after whoever he manages after this, he'll go there and he'll win trophies.
Of course he will.
We all know he will.
Of course he will.
And then
just as Jose did.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that, like, we'll probably be sitting here, like, in the middle of another project while Conte's over another club winning loads of trophies again, and we'll just be still sitting here hoping maybe this project works out, maybe give it a bit more time, and maybe we can start winning things. And it's like, it's so frustrating that we're having all these managers who win trophies everywhere, and they come here and they just can't make it work. And that's just the story of this club.
Well, bring on the Mason, Defoe, Powell and Vorm era. It's going to be a joy to behold from now until the end of the season in that search for the top four.
According to Dan Kilpatrick, Paratici is understood to currently be heading the Tottenham managerial succession planning and drawing up a list of potential candidates understood to be topped by Luis Enrique.
So another one that's going to be gone in 18 months' time.
Pretty much. And also, it is a bit worrying, though, like, Paratici did worry me with his managerial search last time, I have to say. Like, nearly hiring Gattuso and then obviously ending up with Nuno was like...
Whose idea was Fonseca?
Fonseca was before him. And then I don't know, but then Fonseca was before him, and then we were pretty much about to appoint him, and then we appointed Paratici first, and then Paratici pulled the plug on the deal, essentially. So, I don't know, it kind of worries me a bit that Paratici's heading it in a way, because I just don't...
Levy to head it.
I wouldn't want Levy to head it either, but that told me, that managerial search, that maybe he doesn't quite get what the club wants or needs, or what the fans want as well. That's what, like, getting Gattuso in, that has to be a red flag. And obviously he landed with Nuno, who was a horrific appointment. He realised he completely got it completely wrong fairly early, which is fair enough. And then we ended up bringing Conte, but. Like, does Paratici know what we want? I don't know. Like, if the fans are hell bent on, you know, having a manager who plays attractive football and all this kind of stuff, like, does he know? Is that his philosophy as well? Because it doesn't seem to be.
I don't know. I think Paratici's philosophy is pretty much the same as Conte's philosophy, in my opinion. That kind of football, that kind of way of playing, and it doesn't suit us, man. It does not suit us unless we're going to bring in players to win now. It's not going to suit us. We need to go back to what we had before, when we had the youngest team in the Premier League, free-flowing football. And maybe Fonseca was the right choice, to be honest, because, you know, he's doing really well out in France at the moment. And I think his teams have like one of the highest XGs in Europe or something like that. So... maybe he was the right choice at the time, but no.
Here's the PR coming out now. According to Dan Kilpatrick, during Conte's absence, Mason is understood to have made many big calls tactically, including the canny decision to push Eric Dyer into midfield in the 1-0 win against Man City. So Mason was the mastermind behind everything. You heard it here first. Mason is the real reason we ever won games. It was all down to Ryan Mason.
There was another one as well coming out from the Times saying Ryan Mason is a popular figure amongst the Tottenham squad, including Harry Kane. The club are also fans of his work and on the training ground, as they consider appointing him on an interim basis for a second time. So Mason's going to get Harry Kane back on board.
Exactly,
people.
he's going to get Kane to sign on. He's going to. We just. Oh, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, apparently there's a recall option in Winks' loan contract.
Oh, they're good mates, I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. Oh, my God. Like, it's just ridiculous. The whole situation is ridiculous at Tottenham, to be honest. Mason, again, after just 2 years after it happened, that just goes to show the shambles we're in. Yeah. If anything goes to show, the fact that we're appointing Ryan Mason for a second time in 3 years that just sums it up.